You walk the trail alone because you have to. The wagon wheel cracked miles back, and the sun has dropped like a stone behind the tree line. The smell of damp pine needles clings to your boots. Every twig you snap underfoot sounds like a rifle report. You've passed no homes for hours, only twisted deer trails and the occasional scorched log, half buried in moss. Your horse shies again, not from wolves, not from bears, but from something quieter. In your coat pocket is a letter, sealed in wax, stained with sweat. You were meant to deliver it by week's end. It now feels like a prayer folded in paper, because this part of Kentucky has gone wrong. The settlers whisper it in taverns, that the land is cursed, that men vanish from paths like this one, and that if you hear breathing that isn't yours, don't run. It only makes them laugh. Big Harpe, Little Harpe. You've heard the names. No lawman's ever brought them in. They sleep where they want, eat what they want, and leave corpses behind them like breadcrumbs. You reach for your flintlock without looking. History remembers them differently than legend. The Harpe brothers, or cousins, depending on the source, were not just murderers. They were the American frontier's first documented serial killers. Their names were Micajah and Wiley Harpe, though few called them that. Most knew them only as Big Harpe and Little Harpe, and by the summer of 1799, their trail of violence stretched across 4 states. They emerged from the bloody fog of the post-revolutionary frontier, where the thin veneer of civilization frayed along every riverbend. The newly formed United States had little reach beyond its eastern towns. In places like eastern Tennessee and western Kentucky, justice was not blind. It was absent. No jails, no marshals, just cabins, woods, and the kind of silence that let monsters grow. Micajah, Big Harpe, was said to be tall, broad, with dark eyes sunk deep in a square face. Wiley, Little Harpe, was leaner, sharper, and quieter. They wore rough sailors' coats and carried tomahawks, always armed, always moving. But they were more than violent men. They were a myth in motion. Born likely in North Carolina in the 1760s, the Harpes' early years were shaped by civil war, not between nations, but between neighbors. Their families supported the British during the American Revolution. As loyalists, they were ostracized, sometimes hunted. Some historians suggest that these early persecutions bred the Harpes' deep-rooted cruelty, a resentment hardened into sadism. Others will argue the war simply gave them cover, a chance to disappear into chaos and return twisted. By the 1790s, they began appearing along the Wilderness Road, a treacherous path slicing through the Cumberland Gap. It was here they began their spree, not as petty thieves, but as butchers. Unlike other outlaws of their time, the Harpes did not kill for profit. They robbed occasionally, yes, but most of their victims had nothing worth taking. Their crimes shocked the frontier, not because of their number, but because of their nature. Bodies were found disemboweled, stuffed with stones, and cast into rivers. Throats slit with surgical precision, infants killed, women mutilated. In one reported case, a man named Langford was killed after sharing a campfire with them. In good faith, his body was found days later, his insides packed with rocks and flung into the Holston River. Even seasoned trappers went pale at the stories. Because what the Harpes did wasn't just violent, it was theatrical, symbolic, cruelty for its own sake, a spectacle carved into bone. And always they moved with women, 3 in total, believed to be their wives or captives or both. Pregnant, barefoot, often seen weeping, These women trudged alongside the Harpes through every back trail and hollow. Some would later testify against them. Others disappeared. You stop at a clearing. The moon breaks through cloud just long enough to light the path ahead. There, nailed to a tree, is a scrap of hide. Human? Animal? You don't know. But burned into it, crudely, is the outline of a skull and a name. Harpe. The wind presses against your coat. You think of the stones, of the river, and you wonder, how many did they bury that no one ever found? How many more will never be remembered at all? This is not just a story of two men. It's the story of a country being born, and what slipped through its fingers in the process. In the lawless vacuum between war and government, the Harpes became something more than killers. They became a symbol of the danger in ungoverned lands, of the cruelty men justify in the name of survival, and of the stories we whisper to warn one another. Don't follow strangers. Don't travel alone. Don't trust the firelight of a man with no past. You've stepped into the veil, but deeper truths wait, like this story, and let the past pull you back again. You smell smoke before you see it, not the kind that curls from a chimney, but the sharp, bitter scent of wet canvas and scorched flesh. There's a cabin up ahead, what's left of one. The roof collapsed inward. A cradle blackened and overturned outside. No crying, no noise at all. The trail behind you is gone. There's only the clearing now, and a stillness so complete it feels staged. You step into the ash, and you wonder, was it the baby again? Did it cry too loud this time? Historians still debate what drove Micajah and Wiley Harpe, but by 1798, they had become something unprecedented in American memory. The modern term serial killer would not be coined for another 180 years, but the pattern was already clear. While outlaws like Jesse James or Sam Mason, Wiley Harpe's future associate, robbed for wealth or vengeance, the Harpes killed for something else. Perhaps control, perhaps hatred, perhaps nothing at all. Their victims were random, their methods brutal. The murders spread like a sickness across Tennessee and Kentucky, reaching as far north as Illinois and as far south as the Mississippi Territory. They spared no one: men, women, children, strangers, friends, fellow travelers. Among their most notorious crimes was the murder of a man named Major John Love. A former soldier, Love had met the Harpes near Knoxville and agreed to travel with them. Days later, his body was found in the brush, gutted, weighted with stones. His skull caved in. Around this time, settlers began to notice a pattern. The Harpes moved with calm. They didn't run from violence. They carried it. Townsfolk became reluctant to offer strangers food or shelter. Mothers taught children not just to fear the wilderness, but the men who walked it smiling. And yet, for all their notoriety, the Harpes proved nearly untouchable. The frontier's legal infrastructure was skeletal at best. The few jails that existed were escape-prone. Courts operated on letters and hearsay. Rangers might track bandits for weeks, only to find charred remains and no footprints. And the Harpes were always moving. They traveled under aliases: John Seton, Robert Wiley, and wore disguises. Sometimes they posed as traders, other times as preachers. They'd ride into a camp with wives, even children in tow, and speak with the accent of neighbors. That was their talent, looking like someone who belonged, until they didn't. In one infamous episode, they stayed with a family named Stiegel in Kentucky. Welcomed in, federal given beds. The next morning, they left behind a horror. Mrs. Stiegel was murdered. Her baby girl, just days old, was found crushed, allegedly because her crying disturbed Big Harpe's sleep. It is this moment, above all, that shifted them in the eyes of their fellow settlers. From feared outlaws to abominations, you cross the river by foot. The waters are dark, swollen by recent storms. Something snags your leg underwater. You wrench free, breath hitching. It's only driftwood. You think of the rumors again, of bodies filled with stones, dumped into rivers, one for every week that passes. And you ask yourself, is this just madness, or is it something deeper, something ritual? As 1799 approached, the territory braced for what many believed was a final confrontation. The Harpes had made too many enemies. Blood debts had been carved into the trees themselves. It was a man named Moses Stiegel, husband, father, widower, who finally took up arms. Gathering a small posse, he tracked the brothers for days through Kentucky wilderness. It was not law that pursued them. It was grief. On August 24th, 1799, Moses caught up with the Harpes near the Green River. Big Harpe, mortally wounded by a gunshot to the spine, was dragged from his horse. Still alive, still speaking. According to those present, Micajah confessed to the murder of at least 27 people. Some say the number was higher. No one knows the real count. Too many corpses were left in woods, or waded into rivers, or burned beyond recognition. And then Stiegel exacted the frontier's justice. He severed Big Harpe's head while the man still breathed. The skull was nailed to a tree at a fork in the road, a grim warning to any who passed. It hung there for years. The place became known as Harpe's Head, but the tale wasn't over. Wiley Harpe escaped, disappeared south, and for a time, he became another ghost of the wilderness, whispers in the brush, a silhouette behind trees. He would reemerge later under the name John Seton, joining the Mason gang and bringing his own brand of violence to the river trade. But for now, only the wind spoke his name. You stand at that fork in the road now, under the same twisted tree. The skull is long gone, but the shadow remains. And you ask yourself, what do we become when no one stops us? When the land is too wide and the law too thin? You return to the river's edge, where the fog lies low and the stones beneath the surface never shift. No bodies float now, but the silence is the same. The Harpes are gone, but something of them lingers. In stories told too softly, in places named after violence, in the quiet instinct settlers carried westward. Never trust a man too quick to smile. Historians would later call them the first American serial killers, but the truth is colder. They were not first in cruelty, only first to be noticed. Their fame came not from the scale of their crimes, but from what they revealed, that this new country, for all its ideals, was born with shadows in its bones. Micajah's skull rotted on a stake. Wiley swung from a rope 5 years later after betraying yet another band of outlaws. Neither had graves, no crosses, no prayers, just footprints erased by rain. And the women, the three they dragged from town to town, survived. One remarried, one vanished, one gave testimony, and yet the rivers kept flowing. The stone in the belly was always more than disposal. It was a message that some men are too heavy for justice to hold. That memory, like a river, carries only what we refuse to bury. Their legacy is not in names, but in the shape of fear they left behind, and in the hush that follows a knock at the door long after midnight.